Hello and welcome today to today's edition of the Post-Gazette Live. We call it the Big Show here. Every day we talk sports here at postgazette.com and, of course, on the YouTube channel. So make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel and all that other good stuff so that you are always up to date with what we have to talk about. We got a lot in store today. There's a number of different items to get to today. Ben Roethlisberger shooting off his mouth a little bit about the Steelers to Jerry Dulac. James Harrison shooting off his mouth a little bit about the Steelers. I think to Alan Saunders. We have free agency and wide receivers to talk about. We have all kinds of goodies. And, of course, we have this question that I'm going to throw out there now and I'm going to get to in a little bit. But I want you to think about this, because it'll settle an argument that I had with a Steeler fan. Guy I know is a big Steeler fan. We were talking about the fact that the Steelers, of course, they have, winning seasons every year, but they haven't won anything. And, of course, that led me into this discussion. And it's one of these things where I threw this out here, and I want your opinion. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Would you rather be the Bears of the 80s, a team that won one Super Bowl? Probably should have won more than one. They were really good for 4 or 5 years there, but really they only got the one Super Bowl, but they won it. Or would you rather be the Bills of the 90s, who got the 4 Super Bowls and never won, but they got the 4? And they were there every year. And they were there 4 years in a row. And if they're there every year and you have a chance, well, at least you have a chance, right? That's something to ponder, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But again, I threw that up as a Twitter poll, and I'm amazed that there's 13% of the people who have answered the Twitter poll, 13% of them are basically saying they would rather be the Bills of the 80s than the Bears of the Bills of the 90s than the Bears of the 80s, which is insanity to me. At any rate, I think if you really are honest with yourself, you'd rather be the Bears. You'd rather have the one Super Bowl, even if, because Bears fans, and Jim McMahon, when you hear him interviewed and some of those guys, they're talking about how they should have won more than one. But they at least won one. And I look at it like this. You at least won a championship. What are the Bears of the 80s? What are they known for? Winning a championship. Maybe being the best team of all time, that 85 team. What are the Bills of the 90s known for? Losing Super Bowls. They're the butt of the jokes. Even Ice Cube made a joke. Even Ice Cube used, in one of the lines of his song, said something to the effect of, I'm the man, I'm the one with the fat mad skills, and I won't choke like the Buffalo Bills. Steeler fans, I understand, you like to have this model of stability where you win every single year, and you get there, but you never do anything. But the whole conversation started with, I said, okay, the last 8 seasons, would you rather be the Eagles, who had 2 or at least 1 losing season? Maybe even 2, but they had a 4-13. Would you rather do that? But they won a Super Bowl and got back to another. Would you rather be the Steelers and be 9-8 or 10-7 every year and never have that 4 or 5 win season? I think it's lunacy that there are actually Steeler fans out there who will tell you that they would rather have the Steelers last 8 seasons because, consistency. They're there every year. So that's how the whole thing started. Now. One of the discussions that's gone on over the last couple of days that I find amazing is this idea that the Steelers would somehow are going to be in on Tee Higgins. If you believe that, then you really haven't been paying attention to the Steelers for a long time. Okay? Because Tee Higgins is going to break the bank. Break the bank. And at the end of the day, if whatever team gets him, be it Cincinnati, be it, whoever else, they're going to have to pay him as one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. And I did a little looking just on this. I did a little looking on this very subject, right? And trying to see what receivers are getting. What are they getting? Now, forget about total guaranteed money because that's a whole lot of that's a whole lot of money, right? But basically, let's just go with base salary. Tee Higgins, $21.8 million. He ain't going back from there. He's just not. Period. And if you look at what guys are making, right, base salary in 2025, Davante Adams, $35 million. CeeDee Lamb, $27 million. Calvin Ridley, $22.5 million. Jamar Chase is making $21.8 million, and that probably is going to cause some problems for the Bengals because they're going to have to pay Tee Higgins more than that to keep him. But I don't know if are you really going to pay him more than Tee Higgins or that Jamar Chase is making. And then you look at the total guaranteed money. Justin Jefferson, $110 million. CeeDee Lamb, $100 million. A.J. Brown, $84 million. Do you really think that the Steelers are going to come up with and actually be willing to pay, I don't know, $85 to $100 million for Tee Higgins? That's what I would love to know. Because at the end of the day, they're not. They're just not going to pay that kind of money. And he's a guy that's going to be, right top of the list type of guy when it comes to the free agent receivers. He's going to command top dollar, period. He's going to command exactly what he wants, to be honest. Someone asked about Brandon Ayuk, who signed his extension last year. Remember all that stuff with the Steelers were in on him and they were going to try and go get him and all that other stuff. He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal with San Francisco. 4 years, $120 million. I just don't see the Steelers going out and spending that kind of money. Honestly, I just don't see them going out and spending that kind of money on a receiver that's not one of their own, because that's just not how they do things. They do go out and sign receivers from time to time. There's no question about it, period. But if you really look at it, it's one of the things that I would tell you, and this is really it is, Patrick Queen last year signed the largest of any free agent outside deal. Obviously, TJ Watt and some of the other guys that were already on the team got a bunch of money. But in terms of the largest deal, I just saw this today. The largest contract they've given to somebody who is outside the organization is Patrick Queen, 3 years, $41 million. That's 13.6 per. So if you think about it, they would have to go way above that. 3 years, $41 million to sign Tee Higgins. It's not really realistic. It's why I say most of the stuff that you hear on talk radio and all day long, and all these different kinds of podcasts and people write about and tweet about and all this other stuff, most of it is fiction. Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, those are the kind of guys you're probably going to be looking at, to be honest. Somebody in that range. Somebody who is an upgrade over what they have, which isn't saying much, but is an upgrade over what they have, but isn't going to break the bank. Because that's what the Steelers do. They're not going to break the bank. They're just not. They're not going to go out and sign a guy to a bunch of money like that and do so put that kind of money into a receiver, number one, and number two, a guy that's not in their organization already. And so the Tee Higgins discussion to me is probably a lot of waste of time. I know it's kind of interesting, and people like to talk about things like that, and I guess it gets you through, the cold months when you've got, a talk show to fill and all that other stuff, but it's just not realistic. And one of the things I always do is I deal in realism. They will go out and they will find somebody, they will sign somebody, and it might be somebody that's pretty good or decent, but it's not going to be someone that's going to command top dollar. Not at receiver. Maybe, they spend a little bit of money on a corner, but again, that's just not how they've done things. Just as I just said, Patrick Queen is the largest contract they've given out to a free agent from somewhere else. So my thing is, we could sit here and continue to talk about Tee Higgins if you want, and it'd be a nice pipe dream for the Steelers, but it's just not what's going to happen. The Steelers have a better chance of going out and getting somebody that's a little bit more realistic. Somebody who I would tell you, Christian Kirk is a guy whose name I keep seeing coming up, right? There are some guys like that. I hope that we don't go back to the Diontae Johnson right? Chris Godwin is a guy. There are some guys out there. But I would just say this, that, it is kind of interesting that we always spend the offseason talking about the big fish that's never going to land here. Tee Higgins is never coming here. It's never going to happen. And I hate to say it like that because, again, you make these bold declarations and then something happens. And, of course, you'll never, ever, 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 you'll never, ever, ever hear the end of it. I mean, if Tee Higgins signs with the Steelers, I'll never hear the end of it. But it's okay because he's not. The chances of him coming here are slim and none. Period. So I think that's an important thing to note. And I feel like that's where the Steelers are going to sign a receiver, but I would shoot a little bit lower on the scale of where you want to look and where they want to go. So anyway, Ben Roethlisberger spoke, and of course, here's the thing about Ben: you can love him and hate him, but whenever he opens his mouth, it's always news. Even if you watch his podcast thing with what's that dude's name, Spencer or whatever that guy's name is that does it with him. Even if you watch that podcast, it's say they go on for 50 minutes or 55 minutes. For the most part, it's a lot of stuff about beer and this and that and everything. But when he talks about football, it's really good. When he talks about football, it's really good because he's honest. He's not one of these former athletes who, he's still got all these friends on the team, so he watches his words or, he watches. He's honest, and he breaks it down as well as anybody. I mean, he really does. And so he apparently spoke with Jerry Dulac, and he talked to him about the fact that, the Steelers may have lost their way. Here's some quotes from Big Ben. Are you ready? It feels like the Steelers way. It feels like there's no Steelers way anymore. There's still guys who have it, but it doesn't feel like it. It frustrates me to watch it happen. So, the Steelers, he says, it might be time to figure out what you've got to do for the next couple of years to make a run. I don't know that they're that close, to be honest. They're not just a quarterback away, in my opinion. He said they need to figure out what they need to do in a quarterback situation, of course. And he says, you get a guy if you think you're only a quarterback away from winning. And then, of course, he added in, they're not just a quarterback away, in my opinion. Then he was asked about Russell Wilson. If Russ is willing to take a lower deal for less money, I'd go with Russ. If not, I think it's an issue to give Justin a shot. Why not? Let him be in the same system for another year. Give him a chance. What's the worst that happens? If you go with Justin, you pay him less money than Russ. You save some money, and if it goes well, you've got a guy who plays well. If it doesn't go well, you're right back where you can draft a guy. And so that's what you have to think about. Despite making the postseason for the fourth time in the past 5 years, Jerry Dulac writes, Steelers showed they can't beat the best teams in the league when it matters. And he says, do you really think the team is built for a Super Bowl run, Roethlisberger said. I don't think it is yet. So let's break down some of the things he had to say. Number one, it feels like there's no Steeler way anymore. Roethlisberger said, there are still guys who have it, but it doesn't feel like it. It frustrates me to watch it happen. Okay, here's the thing about that. The Steelers way thing has always been a little overstated or overrated in my mind. But here's the reality, okay? And I mean this in all sincerity. Here's the reality with that. Chris Boswell has won a playoff game in a Steelers uniform. Cam Hayward has won a playoff game in a Steelers uniform. Nobody else has. So how many guys in that locker room have the Steelers way? How many of them? How many of them actually have the Steelers way? Not many. 2 is what I've come up with. And if there's only 2 guys in that locker room that have experienced winning in a Steelers uniform, this whole thing about the big bad Steelers and the Steelers way and everybody's afraid of the Steelers and all this other good stuff, guess what? It's all hot air. It is. Nobody's afraid of the Steelers anymore. The Steelers are not the premier team in the league anymore. They're not the team that everyone circles when they got to go play them. They're not the team that everybody fears. And despite all of the discussions about, well, nobody wants to see them in the playoffs, guess what? That's not true either. Everybody wants to play them in the playoffs because they don't win in the playoffs. But what is the Steeler way? That's what I would like to know. What is the Steeler way? We've heard it a bunch of times from a bunch of different people. And there are some people who would tell you the Steeler way is hanging on to a coach 8 years, even though he hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years. That's the Steelers way as well, isn't it? Hanging on to a coach and a philosophy and everything else for 8 years, even though he hasn't won a playoff game. Isn't that part of the Steelers way too? Like, we always hear about the Steelers way, and I think there are some really good things about the way the Steelers do business. I think they have a good plan. I do, for the most part. But part of the Steelers way probably holds them back just as much as it gets them where they want to go. Part of the Steelers way is, the definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over and over again and expecting different results. You're not going to get different results if you're going to continue to do things the same way over and over and over again. Period. And I think that's important to note that, because that's part of the problem, the Steeler way. Secondly, when Ben Roethlisberger talks about, well, it doesn't feel like the Steelers way anymore, I don't know. I mean, again, from 2010 until 2019, who was the quarterback of this team? Remind me. I forget. So, they didn't win a whole lot of playoff games in that time period either, despite having been. So I don't know what that exactly means. I don't know, what we're talking about when someone says Steeler way, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think that a lot of people have different definitions of it. I thought what was also very, very, very true that Ben Roethlisberger says, I don't know that they're that close, to be honest. That's the biggest thing. How close legitimately are they to winning it all? They're not. They're not. And they're deluding themselves into believing they are. And they're deluding themselves into believing they are because what they're doing is this idea that, well, if we keep bringing Mike Tomlin back, well, at least we win every year. And if you win every year, you have an opportunity to get to the final. You don't. They're not good enough. The third thing he said was go with Russ. I don't know if I agree with that, but he said go with Russ. If not, give Justin Fields a shot because what do you have to lose? I think on top of everything else, that is probably the best answer I've heard for why you go with Justin Fields. What do you have to lose? Now, the answer inside the organization would be their, consecutive non-losing streak or whatever the hell it's called. Whatever it is, non-losing season streak. That nonsense. Well, I guess okay, good. So next year, if you go 8-9, is it any different than this year if you went 10-7? If you go 8-9 next year and you find out that Justin Fields is not your guy, guess what? You can get to work on really going out and trying to find your next quarterback. If you go 10-7 next year and Justin Fields by the end of the year looks like, boy, this guy's getting better. He's still young enough. Now you've got your quarterback for the next 5 or 6 years. Even if you're not a Justin Fields fan, I'll be honest with you. The best course of action that I can see, Justin Fields as your quarterback next year. Make the decision and go with it and build an offense around it. Let's see what happens. But even if you're not a fan of Justin Fields, it's the best opportunity you have to start going back up to where you could become an AFC contender, because it would mean if he does well and he plays really well and the offense looks good, it would mean that you have an opportunity down the stretch here, down the road over the next few years. You have the opportunity to go out and win again because you've got a young quarterback in place. Period. And I think that's the thing that you have to look at for next year. Next year has to be the year you figure out what your quarterback situation is for the rest of the time. Now, an interesting development in the Russell Wilson situation is that Russell Wilson, he now is become, Russell Wilson might become a coveted guy when it comes to the Raiders, because the Raiders just hired his coach, Pete Carroll. The Raiders just hired him. And so I feel like it's really important to, see the tea leaves that Russell Wilson, the Raiders need a stopgap quarterback. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, there was tense moments apparently between them when he left Seattle and everything else. But at the end of the day, there was a situation of where it's just now, coming to, I guess, a head where those two are basically have made up and see eye to eye now. That's what I would tell you. And so if that's the case, then Russell Wilson might not be an option for the Steelers because he might sign with the Raiders. I thought it was interesting that Pete Carroll was hired, but if you're the Raiders, you could do a hell of a lot worse than hiring Pete Carroll, right? I mean, Pete Carroll's a guy who's won in the NFL. He's got a pretty good track record. He's obviously won a Super Bowl. Unfortunately for him, he'll always be known as the guy that should have won 2 but was too stubborn, called a pass play when he should have just handed the ball to beast mode. He had beast mode in the backfield, and he wanted to make sure Russell Wilson would win the MVP of the game, so he threw a pass, and it ended up obviously in a big problem. And so it's now, like I said, if it's Fields, it doesn't matter. And just as Alex here pointed out, if they go 4-13, you go out and you get to draft a quarterback. There's no downside to Fields. It's all upside to me, at least to me. That's what I would say. So I feel like, Ben is actually talking about, hey, give Fields a chance and see what happens. Because what's the worst that can happen? Now, another former Steeler that basically, took the knife out and talked about it. And this is, I think, a more direct shot at Mike Tomlin. You tell me. James Harrison. If I'm the head coach of a football team, and I've been the head coach of this football team for however long that's been, and now the team's not doing well, that all has to fall on my shoulders. Because I've been here long enough to be able to draft who I want, put the guys in the positions that I need. For me to be like, I haven't been able to get this or get that. Well, I'm the guy who's supposed to be getting that. And I've been here long enough to get it. That's what I thought was, listen, there's nobody in the media, there's nobody out there that could lay it out better than that. I'm going to read that again one more time. James Harrison, if I'm the coach, if I'm the head coach of a football team, I've been the head coach of this football team for however long that's been, and now that team's not doing well, that all has to fall on my shoulders. Because I've been here long enough to be able to draft who I want, put the guys in the position that I need. For me to be like, I haven't been able to get this or get that, well, I'm the guy who's supposed to be getting that. I've been here long enough to get it. James Harrison gets it. James Harrison clearly understands it. James Harrison clearly knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to, this idea that Mike Tomlin is a victim of a front office, right? He's not the victim of the front office. James Harrison is basically saying Mike Tomlin needs to take this on his own, on his shoulders, because it's all about him in many, many ways. It's all about him. And so, the fact that there are some former players now that are willing to sort of break the code of silence about Mike Tomlin, I think that's significant. I think it's also significant to show that the former players, some that have had success like Ben and James Harrison, guys that have won Super Bowls, guess what? They're not happy with what's going on with the Steelers either. And so it's going to be interesting just to see how it all works out here. But this offseason so far has been a dud. And for those of you that think they're going to go get Tee Higgins to save the offseason, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Bringing it full circle to that question I asked at the start. But first, game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's on Carson Street is the home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. It's the home of Paul Zeise's grilled cheese sandwich. You can go watch all the games this weekend. College basketball all day Saturday. You got football on Sunday all week long. You got hockey, basketball, whatever else you want to watch. You eat great wings. It's a great place to be. So get down to Archie's, and when you get there, tell them Paul Zeise sent you. Now, at the start of this, I asked the question, would you rather be the 80s Bears who who were great for like 5 or 6 years, but won one Super Bowl, probably should have won more, but one only got to one Super Bowl and won it? Or would you rather be the 90s Bills who got the 4 Super Bowls in a row and didn't win any of them? When you listen to Jim Kelly and those guys talk, well, nobody will ever do that again. Nobody will ever get the 4 Super Bowls again. It's a great accomplishment. It is a great accomplishment, but you didn't win one. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know that there are people out there who legitimately believe you'd rather be the Bills than the Bears, because the Bears won a Super Bowl. And as we sit here now, 35, 40 years removed from all of this stuff, right? As we sit here, what do we all think? What do we all think in our own heads? Those of us that are old enough to have lived through those 2 eras. When you hear the words Bears of the 80s, you automatically think maybe the best team of all time was that 85 team. Definitely the best defense of all time, but maybe the best team of all time. You don't talk about the fact that the next year, they probably should have won another Super Bowl. And then the next year when was it Jim McMahon got hurt and they were on their way to probably, winning, having a chance to win. They ended up signing, I think, Doug Flutie, if I'm not mistaken. We don't talk about all the nonsense that happened that prevented them from winning a second or maybe even third Super Bowl, and even getting back there. We talk about the 85 Bears because they won. They're champions. They're the team we talk about. So when we think about the 80s Bears, what do we think of? Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka getting carried off the field, right? Richard Dent, Mike Singletary, those guys from that team, Walter Payton. We think about that team as champions. The Bills, again, they're the butt of everybody's jokes. Let's face it, it was a great accomplishment for the Bills to get to the Super Bowl four times in a row. They won 4 AFC titles in a row. It's incredible. It's incredible. But what are they remembered for? Losing 4 Super Bowls. And the reason I bring that up is because that whole argument came out of this discussion about the Steelers and their non-losing season streak, and whether would you if I told you that over a 6-year period, one of those years they're going to win 4 games, and say the other year they're going to win 6 games, but they were going to win a Super Bowl in there. Would you rather do that or have 6 straight non-losing seasons? And believe it or not, there are people that would tell you they'd rather have the 6 straight non-losing seasons. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And here's the thing. Let me check in on this poll because, again, I put it out there as a poll. To see what people, on social media think. So just give me 1 second here. Let me see if I can pull this up to see what the numbers are. At last glance, right? At last glance, we were at, I think, 13% of the people. 13% of the people. We're still at 13% of the people. Think about that. And we are up to over 500 votes. Think about that. 13% of the people say they'd rather be the Bills. I have to imagine all of the 13%. So, 13% would be, what's 5 times 13? Or 6 times, yeah. But, 5 times 13, whatever that is. That's 80, I think, isn't it? Let's see. 3 times 5 is 15, right? Carry whatever. I can't. 5 times 12 is 70, right? I think. So 5 times 13 has to be, I don't know, 85 or something. I think it's 85. Anyway, I don't know what it is. I can't think straight right now. Anyway, whatever it is, I have to believe all of those people are people that really are into the non-losing season stuff. I do. And so I just feel like, it's depressing. Because honestly, I thought when I put that out there, I figured it'd be like 98% of the people would say the Bears. But they didn't. It's only like 86%. 13.5 or something say the Bills, which is incredible. Speaking of which, this weekend we've got a couple of games, obviously. I think I'm rooting mostly. I think it would be a great Super Bowl would be watching Saquon Barkley against Josh Allen. That would be a great Super Bowl to me. I know there's a lot of people that want to see Washington and that kid, Jayden Daniels. But to me, I would love to see Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen, who I think are the 2 best football players, not named Lamar Jackson in the NFL. Mahomes is obviously the best quarterback. That's not what I'm talking about. But Josh Allen, watching him play is fun. The Bills have never been there. We just talked about it. They were there 4 years in a row and lost all 4. They've lost to the Chiefs. How many times? I think 3 times at least in this little run here to try and get to the Super Bowl. They've got to get over the top. So it wouldn't actually hurt me if it was, the Bills against Washington. It'd be a rematch of the second of the 4 losses of the Bills in the Super Bowl. If you remember, the Bills lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. The first one was the game against the Giants that they absolutely should have won. They blew it, completely blew it. And then, of course, Scott Norwood misses the field goal, and that's what everyone talks about. But there's a million other things that happened in that game that if the Bills just did a couple things better, they win the game. They just kept they kept just dropping passes and missing tackles and all kinds of nonsense. It shouldn't have even come down to that field goal. But anyway, they lost that one. The second year they played the Redskins, and the Redskins had the Hogs, and really the Redskins beat them up pretty good. But early in the game, they had a chance to do a couple things really that might have changed that game, and they just didn't. Starting with the fact that Thurman Thomas left his helmet somewhere and couldn't find it. So the first series, they had Kenneth Davis back there, and he screwed up 2 running plays that cost them to have to punt. Whereas they were scripted plays. If Thurman Thomas was in, he probably would have ran, maybe even would have ran for a touchdown on the first play of the game. But either way, the bottom line is then they lost to the Cowboys 55-17. That game was a disgrace. I think they had 9 turnovers in that game or something like that. And then the last year they lost to the Cowboys again. I want to say it was something like 30-13, maybe something like that. Whatever it was just really, really bad. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see if the Bills can get over this mental block of beating the Chiefs. And I think if they can, they have a really good chance to win the Super Bowl, because I think they match up with Washington and the Eagles. And of course, then it becomes, can the Bills win a Super Bowl? So there's that. I think this weekend, what's going to happen, though, unfortunately, I think the Eagles will win because they've got a really good defense. Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, I think they'll be able to run the ball and score enough points against the Redskins, Commanders, Washington football team, whatever we call them these days. And the other part of that is, I think that if you look at it from that standpoint, you're going to be looking at the Chiefs again. They're not going to lose. They're just not going to lose. They're not going to lose at home. Patrick Mahomes is not going to lose at home. And I know there's a lot of cynical people who say, well, it's because of the referees and all the other stuff. I don't believe that. I'm just telling you, Patrick Mahomes, give him the football in the fourth quarter with a chance to win. He's winning, especially on his home field. And what's funny is, the Chiefs have really changed over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. They've gone from that quick strike, big play, high-flying offense to a team that grinds it out on offense and lets Mahomes make just enough plays to win, and they play great defense. And so, from that standpoint, if you watch the game, the matchup is going to be, can Josh Allen and the Bills offense make enough big plays to score enough points against that defense to have a chance to win? I mean, I thought last week against the Ravens, they almost lost because they got really conservative in the second half. And they got really conservative, when they had a lead, and it was almost like they were trying to run out the clock a little bit. And you just can't play that way against the high-powered offense. And it almost cost them. They've got to be aggressive this week from the start of the game if they want to have a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes. Because and I know, and everybody else that watches football knows, if Patrick Mahomes has the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game, he's winning it. Period. The Bills have to be up by 10 points or more. Now, the other part of it is maybe the Bills could come from behind. But again, I think the way they're playing, they have got to basically allow Josh Allen to be Josh Allen, to make big plays. And if he's able to do that, they're going to have a chance to win this thing. The other game, to me, I think the Eagles' defensive front seven, especially their defensive line, I think they're going to get to this Jayden Daniels kid. I think they're going to, make it hard on him to make plays like he did last weekend. And I feel like they're going to have a hard time running the football against the Eagles. And if that's the case, I just don't know. I just don't know if the Commanders, Redskins, Washington football team, whatever we call them, if they have a chance to win the game, unless Again, the Eagles turn the ball over. I feel like Saquon Barkley is going to have another big day. I think Jalen Hurts will have a big day running the football. They'll make just enough plays in the passing game, down the field to A.J. Brown or whatever. I feel like we're going to be talking about Eagles, right? Eagles versus I'm going to go Eagles versus Chiefs. Now, I said that's not necessarily what I want. What I really want is Bills versus Eagles, or Bills, a rematch of what would have been 91 or 92, whatever year that was. Bills versus the, Redskins Commanders football team, whatever. But I kind of feel like it's going to be Eagles versus Chiefs. Both home teams win, and we get sort of a rematch, and we see if the Eagles can get over the top and win it. Till Monday, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.